Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today I have a special guest. His name is Chad Bareither. Who are you, Chad?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me on, Harley. Who am I is maybe a bigger question. What I do is I help leaders get their time back and improve performance. So I work with leaders in small to medium-sized organizations to understand their current business challenges and then mobilize that into a strategy. So how do they formulate that into the goals and objectives they want to achieve? And then I coach them through identification of processes and process improvements, and then ultimately building a system of management, so a management structure around sustaining that. So it's probably a long way of saying I'm a consultant, but that word leaves a bad taste in some people's mouths. So.
No, yeah, that's really well said. Like, being precise on actually what you do. Saying a consultant can mean so many things. So that gets right to the root of what you truly do, which is really interesting. And so, did you go to school for industrial engineering?
I did, yeah. So, once upon a time, I went to school for mechanical engineering, and then through an internship, kind of figured out that was not for me. And I remember working in an internship at Caterpillar, the large heavy-duty equipment manufacturer. And sitting in front of the computer screen on CAD, like most of the day, I remember the best part of that whole internship was actually getting to go down to the manufacturing floor and talk with some of the production staff. So I was like, I think I like it down here a little bit more than up next to the computers all day. And so I talked to some folks about what it was they did, and they said industrial engineering. And so, yeah, I ended up, doing a follow-on degree to that, so a master's degree in industrial engineering. And a lot of organizations, higher education organizations call it, they kind of package that together, industrial and systems engineering. So it's really a systems focus or systems view of the world.
That's interesting. It happens to be what I'm studying too, which is kind of a nice tie-in. But what is industrial engineering?
Yeah, so if you kind of take the front word of that, industrial, right, it comes out of the Industrial Revolution. So you can trace origins of this science and some of the best practices and all the way back to like the mid 1700s. So the Industrial Revolution, depending upon where you look that up, is like mid 1700s to mid 1800s. And it's really about this systems thinking of like, how do you integrate materials and people and information and equipment all together to produce an output. So whether that's a product, a good that you're manufacturing, or a service that you're delivering, it's all a system, a network of this information and people and materials that come together. And so it's thinking about, so how do we optimize that system to deliver whatever that product or services that you're providing for your customers. And it's a little bit different take. I don't want to say it's unique in the engineering fields, but it is different in that most engineering fields are decompositional, meaning like you need to understand the parts before you understand the whole. So as I mentioned, mechanical engineering, you don't start out mechanical engineering with designing cars. You kind of, before I can design a car, I need to understand how a transmission works. Before I understand a transmission, I need to know how a gear works. Before I know how a gear works, I need to understand material properties. Before that, I'm like doing tensile tests on a billet of material in a lab. Like I need to understand the smaller parts to build up to the larger system. And industrial engineering is almost the reverse. Like I can't really understand the impact of the part until I understand the output of the whole. So you're usually trying to optimize the system and then kind of work backwards to figure out what parts need to change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. That's interesting. It's like, it's more bigger picture, whereas mechanical might be so focused on, making one aspect of the company or a product perfect, whereas, the industrial engineer might be looking at the entire floor, how everything is running, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I sometimes, when people ask, what is industrial engineering? I give this definition. I'm curious to see if this is a definition that would make sense to you, which is, it's kind of like an engineering of business, how to engineer a business to be profitable, effective, efficient, productive, all of those things. And would you say that's a summary that I would is reasonable?
Yeah. I think it is reasonable because at its core, the business is a system. It's a system of systems, right? Because even the manufacturing floor doesn't run unless you can figure out the logistics of getting parts in. The manufacturing floor also doesn't work if you can't figure out the HR system. How do we get talent recruited and onboarded and trained? And so like there's all these facets to it. You can keep zooming out to a certain extent, and it's systems of systems. And then just depending upon what, I guess, elevation you engage at. Yeah, so the business, so that makes a lot of sense to me. It's the engineering of business. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, like you were saying, it's a system of systems. And like, whereas like, you might have the CAD department, they might be so focused on their CAD drawings and, they might not realize how that might impact the HR. Whereas in reality, an industrial engineer might see that, hey, whatever they're doing truly impacts them on the other side of the equation, because all of this, even though they're different departments, it's one system that's coming, or it's multiple systems coming together as one system, one goal, one hierarchy, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's interesting. It's very cool to me. And so what different continuous improvement? Well, first off, explain continuous improvement.
Oh,
that's a common term from what I hear in my schooling.
It is, right? So if we look at the two different terms, so like improvements, obviously to make things better, and continuous being the thought of like continually optimizing, is that we in industrial and systems engineering, typically you're trying to optimize the system. So you establish a certain state of performance, and then there's always an opportunity to take that to another level. So continuously moving that up. Now, because industrial engineering has some of its history, right, more in manufacturing, to say I'm going to do industrial engineering of your HR process, like I think it didn't really have like a good marketing sense to it. So continuous improvement is really based in a lot of industrial engineering best practices, methods, tools, things like that. And so over the years, we've had organizations that have had dramatic business success kind of taking these industrial engineering approaches and expanding the system, the walls of the system, if you will. So you look at what Toyota did following World War II and the recovery, and they built what now is referred to as lean management, right? And so that's a methodology that is anchored in industrial engineering. And you look at what Motorola did in the 70s and 80s with Six Sigma, and Six Sigma was a branded name that they put on that and a marketing label that they put on, which were industrial engineering and statistical best practices that eventually expanded beyond the shop floor, if you will. And over the years, there's been a number of those things like theory of constraints, and quality circles and other elements of that. But when foundationally, most of those approaches, those flavors of continuous improvement are anchored in industrial engineering methodologies.
Interesting. And so what is lean management? People listening might hear that and say like, so what is that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because we can have this perception of engineering being very analytical, being very cold and calculated. And, if you go back, so it's going to be a long answer, so just get yourself ready for that. Is that if you go back to where like some of the initial thinking is, so we're industrial revolution and you have thinkers. So even like 1776, it's the founding of our nation, but also simultaneously like in Scotland, there's an economist named Adam Smith that writes a paper called The Rise and Fall of the Wealth of Nations. And he talks not only about economy, but also about building up manufacturing efficiencies to grow your economic base. And some of the writings he talks about there in division of labor become underpinnings for changing the way we think from craft manufacturing to more industrial production. And like, I don't know, it's early 1800s, there's a English mathematician, Charles Babbage, who writes a book about the economy of machinery and manufacturers. And he talks really about how we can leverage machines and shop floor layout to get higher production out and again, translate that into building the economy. So everything so far is pretty calculated, right? How do I get more efficiency out? And it's very numbers driven, calculated, things like that. Even early 1900s, sometimes maybe considered the godfather of industrial engineering is Frederick Winslow Taylor, and he wrote in the early 1900s the Principles of Scientific Management, and he talks a lot in there about things like the one best way to do a job. So we start to understand things like standard practices. We were talking about this right before recording, right? If I want to scale a business, I need standards to make sure I can replicate that quality of product or service that I'm delivering. And so all of that is very calculated. Now, the thing that lean management and what Toyota got right and through a lot of this is also the relationship with people. Like, it's not just this top-down command and control view of I'm the industrial engineer or the business leader or whatever, and I'm going to do the analysis and show you the better way to do it and hand you the better way to do it. It's really involving and thinking about the development of people. And that is sometimes missed when we talk about industrial engineering or some of these management philosophies, continuous improvement philosophies. When you hear, and you can read literature where they say like it has failed, right? Like a failed Six Sigma deployment. And part of what has failed is the all components of the respect for people. So like, how do I involve the people on the shop floor, on the front lines that are the cleaning crews or whoever, to say, do we understand how we're running the business and we're looking to improve something or make it better? And so, yes, you can drive this culture and this mindset of continuous improvement, optimizing a task or a process or a system. But if we're not involving people in that to kind of foster the change management, to have them involved and invested rather than you just handing them, here's the new way to do your job, it's not sustainable. But what's really interesting is if you go back and look at some of those texts, right? So Adam Smith wrote The Rise and Fall of the Wealth of Nations and talks about division of labor. He also wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiment, which he talks a lot in there about motivations and the human conscience and how and social relationships. So he did not separate the two of like calculated growth of the economy and optimization, but also understanding mutual sympathy for moral judgments. You had Charles Babbage wrote the text about machinery and manufacturing, and definitely was looking at some of the calculations around optimizing shop floor space. But he also talked about regulation of power, control of raw materials, like ergonomics, understanding the relationship between man and machine. Frederick Winslow Taylor talked about, the one best way to do a job, but he also quoted in saying, and I wrote this down so I didn't get it wrong, right? The duty of teaching and enforcing the adoption of standards lies with management. So like, if the system has broken, it's not that the workers failed. That is management's job. So this change in perspective of management's job is to help make the work better and easier for the employee is what lean management got right, in my mind, my humble opinion. And where we've maybe missed the boat in some other corporate initiatives that are all about like top down, like cost cutting and dollar savings.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had to do a bit of a school project. It was called work design. That was the class. And it was like, go find a real world example of a system that could be optimized. And I was like, I'm going to go with Expert Cleaning Services. That's the company I work at for. And that I had so many examples, and like, I was thinking of implementing a system, and then I was like, wait a second. Maybe I should involve the employees before I make this change. Here, let me just ask all of them real quick. Each day that I was there was different people there. I got a few different opinions, and then I texted a few other people, and they were like, they gave me some thoughts that really opened my mind. I was like, and then one of them said, I really don't think that's the greatest idea because this, and this. And I was like, wow, really well said. I didn't even think of that. And it's like, I'm not the person always out there cleaning, and you are. And it's like, wow, man, I should probably ask the person who's doing the job, because they know best about, what the biggest cons or pros are to what they're doing. And so I love how you were saying, like, it's not just about efficiency, productivity, money saving, money making. It's like, no, we got to involve the humans that are doing it, and, keep the relationship there strong and make sure that they're happy, and honestly ask their opinion, because they love to talk about their life. So why not ask about it? So I like how you said that, like the Adam Smith, both sides of the equation, the human, like social side, and then the economic side as well. So
yeah, let me, because you share that, I'll share you an example. And it's a terrible failure on my part, right? But sometimes we learn more from our failures than our successes. As I was working on a project, and it was a 4-week effort to optimize, but really to improve the output, the productivity, as we measured it, for a particular assembly line. And on paper, like, we did all the analysis, and on paper, we decided that the final assembly step could be done and still meet our throughput time with 3 workstations instead of 4. So essentially what that means is 3 employees instead of 4. Now, I want to be clear. In this case, there was other work in the plant. We weren't firing anyone. We were just saying you would only staff 3 people on this assembly line instead of 4. So you can imagine, as the industrial engineer and the continuous improvement expert on the project, that was pretty intriguing, right? Because it made the numbers look really good. 2 of the assemblers that were on the team were very hesitant. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think we can keep up with that pace for a full shift. And myself and the other lead of the project dismissed it. And they didn't hit target for 3 months in a row. Like, it was terrible. It was, and there I am, and they're basically like, told you. And so that's a great real example I have of going back and still remember having this conversation in the conference room with them, of saying, this is the layout we're going to do. This is the division of the work, right? So we're going to reallocate some of the work. And them saying, I don't think that's going to work. And we said, we're going to try it anyway. And so to your point, yeah, we should have had that respect for them, their expertise, their knowledge of, maybe there was something that wasn't in the data exactly that showed they wouldn't be able to keep up for a whole shift. And we move forward. So you can't lose that if I can't bring the people along, like, it's not really a sustainable solution.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, a guy who I was in my class, he was working at a manufacturing company, and he was like, the biggest key is what he said. The biggest key, in my opinion, is forming a somewhat deep relationship with the assembly line workers. Because if you're going in there acting all high and mighty and saying, oh, I know, I'm smarter, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, it's like, they're not going to want to listen. They're not going to care. Yeah. It's like, you got to truly show, like, I'm doing this because I want to make your life better. I want to make your life easier. Like maybe the Frederick Taylor would say, there might be a better solution, and I want to find that best solution so that your day and life and job can be best. Mm-hmm. And so,
and we can't forget about developing the people, right? So it's respect for the people, yes, to involve them in the decision, but ultimately the purpose is to develop people. So who better at some point in the future to take over as like team lead of a production line than someone who has worked on that production line? But they can only do that. Well, I shouldn't say they can only do that. They can do that more effectively if you've developed that skill set. So if you've developed in them that thinking of like, how do I analyze a process? How do I problem solve, right? How do I explore a process change? How do I do some of these calculations? Like, it's not just about me and my success and me walking away and be like, look how I improved this assembly line. It's part of the respect for people is also developing them so they can step into that next role for their development. Because I'm not with that organization anymore, right? If I was doing my job more effectively, lesson learned, it was more about, can I develop these folks to step into the shoes that I'm leaving behind?
Yeah, that's well said. And going back to that example of, the 3 versus 4 workers on the assembly line, what analysis did you perform? Like, were you using a software? What were you using to discover at least that the numbers made sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, we were doing time studies. So that's pretty,
Mm-hmm.
uh, like industrial engineering 101, right? Look at the standard
Mm-hmm.
process, measure it. I mean, like stopwatches on the production floor. And then, yeah, I mean, the calculations were done in Excel, but it wasn't a lot of fancy software. And we were just looking at where we could identify efficiency gains through simple things like reorienting tools, moving things closer to the workstation, changing sequence of operations. So the analysis was all, I mean, pretty much done by hand. Because in my opinion, you
No,
don't
yeah.
need these really fancy or sexy analysis tools. There are definitely systems that are more complex, right? Air traffic control and commercial aviation is like a volumes that you can't do on a calculator. But in that case, it's a pretty simple system, and you're looking at what is the standard process, how long does it take to do each process step, where can we find any sort of improvements or simplifications, and can we get it down to where that fits within 3 operators instead of 4.
Makes sense. Yeah, I've worked with a few softwares, but time studies I've also done. So I was curious what strategies you were using. But you were mentioning it was Toyota and one other Motorola and other companies, and how like probably a lot of the big companies in the world have industrial engineers or hire consultants and use these lean manufacturing principles. Why do you feel like a lot of companies? Well, I guess the question might be, why do you feel like a lot of companies do not use these? Like,
Mm.
do you feel like a lot of companies do or don't, or what do you think the ratio is, and why do you think people don't if they don't?
Yeah, well, so it will be a lot of I think, because I don't know the numbers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think a lot of organizations have of some form or other a continuous improvement program, and I should probably maybe do air quotes like a continuous improvement program. But there's a fundamental flaw in that continuous improvement shouldn't just be a program, right? It's not a bolt-on solution where we say we do our work and then we're going to slam additional work, which is continuous improvement on top of that. It should really be, and again, this is where the organizations, the progress that Motorola made with quality in the 80s, the progress that Toyota made through the 60s and 70s with quality and efficiency of production in automotive, in that's the way they do business. It's not like this additional thing that we're doing. So in a lot of organizations, I do believe that most large organizations have some form of a continuous improvement element somewhere in their business, but it is not how we run our business. And so that's kind of the first thing of where we end up falling short, right? It's something else that we do. And so if I asked you as an example to say, do all your work and then do all this additional continuous improvement stuff, and then inherently there's pressures in the business, you have deadlines or urgent matters that come up, what's going to be the first thing you stop? It's going to be the additional work that you stop. So inherently the continuous improvement elements become less sustainable because it's not how I run my business, it's in addition to running my business. I think the second thing is that management is often not fully committed to it, meaning they may bring in the program, they may hire the consultant, but most organizations are not willing to change their management structure. So if we think about this paradigm, and I should definitely credit Bob Emiliani with these terms, is like you have like lean management, if you will, and you have classical management. And if classical management is more of that command and control that you think about of like top down driving, squeezing the process for every nickel that you can get out of it, is that why would anyone in that system want to change? So if you think about that, if I've come up through the system and I've been promoted and I'm getting paid more and I'm one step away from it, why would I want to change the system that got me to where I was? What is my incentive to change the roles and responsibilities that I have? And I'm being dramatic to make a point, is that, a lot of classical management is more on self-interest, right? And it's like, it's my privilege. I've become a manager, so now I have this privilege of being management, where it's reversed. The servant leadership of lean management is more, I become a manager or a leader. I am now accountable for all of these people and making sure they know how to do their job correctly. They have everything they need. They're being developed and they're continuously improving their processes to make their work easier. That is a very different mindset shift that doesn't happen with a lot of the continuous improvement programs that people may push out. We brought this in to cut costs. Okay, but it doesn't really change the way that we're running the business. And so as soon as maybe the leader who was the linchpin to bring it in and be driving it moves on, what is holding it together? Nothing, because it's still the additional work that you were doing on top of your classical management structure that you have. And unfortunately, that classical management structure has created problems in some industries, right? There's still a lot of strife on supply chain issues coming out of the pandemic. And a lot of that was driven by single sourcing and globalization and outsourcing of work. And then we create these supply chain constraints on the system because it was a cost cutting exercise, right? It might be better for the customer to have a more reliable local source for something. But if I can save 15 cents a unit by going somewhere else, all that profit goes to shareholders, right? And stock owners. And does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, like just the other day, one of my professors was like, yeah, cutting costs, it sounds really attractive, for a business owner, but let's say you cut costs and you bought, lower quality material or whatever. And it's like, guess what? Now your quality is low. It's like, and now guess what? Now your competition's going to beat you anyway. So it's like, cutting costs may not be even the best goal. Improving quality as much as possible seems like the better goal. And that might even bring in more profit at the end of the day because you're competing against your competitors better. Mm-hmm. But just a thought.
Yeah, and everything that I'm saying, it's to make it like polar or black and white, and it's not binary, right? You have management structures that kind of move across that spectrum. But to get back to your question about, so why don't some of these improvement methodologies stick? Because here's the thing: if you ask me, some of the foundational elements that are in Lean, that are in Six Sigma, that were in theory of constraints, that were in quality circles, are the same. And they work for some companies, but not others. So, like, why is that? And the underpinnings behind that just become, the cultural behaviors of the leaders of like, am I changing the way that I run my company? Or am I bringing this in, back to your point about just to cut costs? In which case, I'm not invested in actually changing the way that I run my company. I'm invested in making a couple more nickels this year. And that's not a sustainable way to continuous improvement.
Yeah, that's well said. And it's probably not a vision that the employees are really that passionate about getting behind. Oh, why are they doing these changes? Oh, to cut costs. And it's like, well, that's not really that, that's not going to inspire the workers to really be interested in even listening or trying what they're trying. And it's like, maybe the vision could be, we want to make this workplace a lot more, better, ergonomic, et cetera, whatever, make your day at work just better. And so, yeah, that's interesting. But I guess another question would be, what would you say the first step is for someone who is in a management role or maybe a business owner role? What is that first step that they could do to start implementing some of these practices or changing their management from classical more to lean? Like, what would you say? I guess it probably depends on the industry and on the business, but like, what typically do you see as like the first thing to attack?
Yeah. So I'm going to be biased here because I like my approach. So I think, and I've seen success over doing this for 17 years now, is that the first thing you have to do is get aligned on priorities. And that all boils back down to strategy. So what are we trying to accomplish and what needs to happen on a daily basis to deliver that? So, we were talking a little bit before you started recording about management systems. So first I need to know what I'm trying to accomplish, and then I need to build that system of management underneath to accomplish that. But you say, what's the first thing is being very clear on what I'm trying to accomplish. And so when I work with organizations, we need to understand, do you have a clear mission and vision for your organization, right? Why do you exist? Who do you serve? And then vision of like, what are you trying to accomplish? What's that utopian state you're trying to create for you and your customers? Great. So you're not there yet. So then we would look at strategy of like, so what are you trying to accomplish in the next, 1 to 3 years? And how do we measure progress towards that? Now, if you can get the organization rallied around that, they understand it helps align your decision making. So I wouldn't make decisions that would go against that. Back to your example about quality versus cost cutting, if I say I want to increase quality of product, I might not make decisions that would save cost but compromise quality, right? So that's a very simplistic example, but we would look at the top level of what we're trying to deliver. So that could be, we want shorter lead times or better on-time delivery with whatever your product or service is. It could be quality, as we mentioned. It could be cost, like unit cost, I guess, depending upon the industry they operate in. If it's a commodity, it's sometimes a race to the bottom, so you do need to produce more efficiently. It could be safety. There's a wonderful case study of Alcoa, the aluminum company of America, and how that company was turned around all based upon a safety metric, right? Of saying they had a poor performance in the industry, and they used safety as the catalyst for continuous improvement, right? Of saying if we can just make the workplace safer, all sorts of additional benefits came out of that. So yeah, that's the first place to start is like, are you clear on what you're trying to accomplish? Because if you're clear on what you're trying to accomplish, then your set of daily priorities gets narrower, right? So every business, regardless of size, has problems every day, right? I mean, there's always stuff to decide or troubleshoot or mitigate every single day. If we can be clear about what we're trying to accomplish, then it kind of narrows that solution set of like, well, what should I be spending my time on as a leader? Should be spending my time on the things that are most closely aligned with those things that I said are my priority. And so I was referencing the case study of Paul O'Neill when he was leading Alcoa, the aluminum company of America. And he came in, and the metric he decided to work on was safety, which was crazy for a CEO to say, I'm not going to talk about cost or shareholder value or blah, blah, blah. I'm going to focus on safety. But by doing that, and he set up a system, a management system around that created the vehicle for continuous improvement. So now, anytime there was a safety incident, it had to be reported with actions. So then workers started getting involved in reporting unsafe conditions and correcting them. So they had fewer lost time accidents, and they had fewer liabilities for disability payments and everything else. And then they started figuring out like, well, some of the things that were unsafe, it's actually more efficient to operate this way. And then they kind of spiraled that into efficiency gains. But it all started with, and I mean, this is where Paul O'Neill is more brilliant than I'll ever be, right? It's like it kind of anchored in the fact of what is the one thing that we want to go after. And then it becomes very clear on a daily basis for your decision making of what you need to prioritize as a leader.
Yeah, that's interesting. And like maybe in this priority list, you can analyze, okay, what are the priorities of, the person in charge, like the manager? What are the priorities of the people below? Like maybe the priority, like some things might have a higher priority and other things might have a lower priority, depending on who you're asking. Like, are you saying that just the manager should do that, or everyone in the company should analyze their priorities? Or
well, yeah. So I mean, we can't have, while you could definitely look at additional things at each layer. If you kind of think about that management system like a tree, right, that kind of ends in whatever metric you're looking at, delivery, or in this case, we're using the example of safety. You get down below that and say, well, what needs to be true to create that safe environment? Then you go the layer beneath that and say, what processes do we have in place? And then you go the layer below that and say, what evidence can we go see on a daily basis? So at a shop floor, you're probably confirming those evidence things. At the next level up, management is verifying the processes. At the next level, directors are ensuring that we have all the requirements met. And the top level, that if you're doing all those right things on a daily basis, you end up with zero lost time incidents. And you can follow that same path depending upon what your priority metric is. And so whether that's, business growth, in which case a lot of your activities would be around sales and marketing, or in this case, safety, where it's around operations, or if it's in delivery, so we're focused more on manufacturing and logistics. Like it kind of depends, but that tree branches out, and depending upon the level of the organization, that's your contribution, if you will, that process, that evidence to achieving the overall goal at the top. So that's kind of the starting point, is figure out, what do I want to accomplish? What does success look like for me? What can I unify my team around? And then by building out the set of requirements, processes and evidence, then I make it very clear for everyone to say what's important to take care of. There's always going to be urgent things, right, that come up, but what's important to take care of on a daily basis.
Yeah, interesting. And then you might run into people who say, oh, my business is already successful. I don't need to implement these new practices. What I have already works. Why should I care? Like, what would you say to someone like that? Oh, it's not broke. Why would I fix it?
So there was a quality leader, I can't remember what year he passed away on, but he did a lot of work in automotive, specifically in Japanese auto manufacturers in the 50s and 60s, W. Edwards Deming. And he's quoted as saying, improvement is not required because survival is not mandatory. So to that business leader that says, I don't need to improve my processes, it's like, you're correct. You do not need to improve your processes. You do not need to. If you want to, though, this is the way to do it. And the want, again, goes back to your first point of like, why am I even doing this? Before we bring in and you hire trainers or do, improvement activities, or, 5S, like start taping off floors and organizing shelves. Like, if we can anchor first on like, what are we trying to accomplish, first of all? So to the business leader who says, I don't need to do it, it's like, fine, like you don't. But until that business leader commits to, I need to improve, or I need to stabilize, whatever it is, I need a system to stabilize and improve my business, then you're right, you don't. But a more agile competitor will come in and take that from you.
That was a great answer. I love that. Yeah, I wrote that down. That was really good. Deming. I'm studying him actually currently, so I might actually bring this quote up to my professor, and he'll be surprised. But yeah, like you said, it's like the market is competitive, and if you don't recognize that there's always something to improve, hence the name continuous improvement. It's like, it's never perfect. There's no perfect system. There's always something you can improve, always something that could be better. So it's like, if you're willing to, as a business owner or a manager, be humble and say, hey, I'm aware that there might be some insufficiencies. I might even be blind to them, but I want to hear other people's perspectives. And I bet those are the companies that really, truly grow and improve and shred the other people in competition. And yeah. And so like I think I know your story somewhat, but I don't fully know. Where you were working at a bigger company, but then you decided to, maybe because of how passionate you are about this process, to then branch off and start consulting for other people. Explain that story, why you did that and how that all happened.
Yeah. So I was working for a larger company, like a Fortune 500 company. And I was doing essentially what I do now, but as an internal resource, right? So I was helping develop and deploy what the management system, or some people would say the lean management system or lean operating system, was for the business. On the side, like a friend of a friend's company asked me if I could help out. And I said, sure. So I started an LLC, and I'm like, that's fine. Make a couple of bucks on the side. And then they came back and said, well, that was really helpful. Could you also do this? And I said, yeah, I know how to do that. And then this. And then so I had one client that I was supporting like 3 different things for. And then by word of mouth, and another client said, hey, we could use help with this. Can you help us? And I said, yep, I can help do that as well. So this is all side hustle, if you will. and I have no need to really grow that business, right? So it's all growing organically, right? Just through word of mouth and referrals. And then by the time I took on the third client, and one of those first two clients wanted to sign on to a larger retainer style contract, then I had a decision to make of like, is this what I want to do and do this independently? And I did. I had for years, and it was just kind of, it happened through positioning, correct positioning of like, do people know what I'm offering? And yes, people knew what I did for a living, and I don't know, I feel I was pretty good at it. And have you proven yourself? So that's kind of the credibility portion of it. So by that point, I made the decision, and I said, yeah, I'm going to go after this alone. So I am self-employed currently. So I run a consulting company that's really me. And in the process of serving clients over the last 3.5 years, have really honed my unique approach of seeing what works, what doesn't work, what is easy to convey and adopt for across a number of industries. And so I am in the process of codifying all of that into a book and writing it down, talking back about management systems. That is my system. So if I can codify my system, right, that's a platform to scale. Then if I ever need to take on more work and hire Harley Seelbinder to come consult with me, then I have the playbook where I can essentially say like, and this is how you do it. And then we can confirm that process and everything like that. So yeah, that's how I got there. I mean, I worked for three different very large organizations as an internal resource. And then eventually after, years of developing my expertise, seeing what happened, and then just positioning myself correctly, I was able to kind of step out onto my own platform.
That's amazing. And do you notice yourself implementing these Six Sigma, lean manufacturing, industrial engineering principles into your own business? Like, do you find yourself being like, okay, I got to practice what I preach, I do all this for other businesses, but how do you implement those into your business? I bet it's maybe easier with you being like, the main person or the only person, but.
Well, yeah, you would think that, but it's interesting.
Enough.
Like, so in the system I use, right, there's three simple elements to it. So it's strategy. So I need to have strategy and deploy that. I need to have an ability to document and improve my processes, and then a system for daily management or process management. So strategy, improvement, and management. And so when you're a solopreneur, if you will, I am responsible for all of that. So when you say it's easier, it's like, well, that requires a lot of self-discipline to say, am I balancing each world? And this is, maybe I'm getting a little selfish by saying this, but a typical consultant's dilemma, especially in a smaller firm, right, is like you're trying to balance between serving your clients, right, and marketing. And like, it's very easy to say, I have a client base I'm delivering, and you kind of let your foot off the gas pedal on marketing and sales, because to keep both of those engines moving forward is a balance. But I am trying to be better about it. And yes, is I guess the long answer to your question of like, it's hard, but I am developing systems around how do I keep my marketing presence? How do I continuously focus on strategy and refining my positioning and getting in front of clients and leads? But then also, how do I continue to deliver value for customers?
Yeah, that's really cool. And I bet, well, cool is the wrong word, but I bet writing that book is helping you sharpen those skills and maybe even, concretely get you to, well, act on them more. Like you said, it takes a lot of discipline, but in you writing this down, practicing what you preach, it seems to me like you could hone in the three, what'd you call them? The three strategies, what were those
three
elements?
Again?
The three elements.
Yeah, of your management system. Yeah, 3 elements. That's right. Take anything, to you or your listeners, take anything that you're good at, right? That you say, I'm good at this. And then say, okay, go teach someone else to do it. Right? That's essentially what it is saying, okay, can you? Like, can you explain to someone else how you got good? So you've developed a skill set around podcasting and video production. And if someone else came to you right now and said, how do I get to where you're at? Right? You don't have that system written. Well, I don't know. Maybe you do. I'm assuming you don't have that system written down yet, right? But that's
A little bit.
Yeah.
Working on it, I guess.
So like if I wanted to start a podcast and I said, Harley, help me get to where you're at faster, right? That's essentially what I'm trying to do is like I've spent 15 years, 17 years developing this knowledge base to say, how do I condense that in and say, here is what you need to pay attention to as your first steps. Here's a set of tools organized in a system, delivered in a process. And if you can just do that over and over again for multiple organizations, that's where I'm driving right now.
That's amazing. And what's the most interesting success story you've seen either in the big companies you've worked for or maybe a small company or a company you've consulted for or et cetera?
Okay. Probably not the answer you want, because I could go and I could talk about, dollar figures with millions on the back that I've helped contribute to save. But honestly, tying this all back to respect for people, the most significant change or win or success was we were doing an improvement event. And this was for a client that does electric and natural gas distribution, right? And so one of the things you have to do, so natural gas, you have lines that are buried in the ground. So anytime you change those, you replace them, you move them, anything, you have to update your records because that would be a big problem if someone dug into that at a later date, right? And it's full of natural gas. So you have to, by regulation, like keep all of these things updated. And so a process that they have is whenever they would perform construction on any of the lines, they would have to send those field drawings back to be updated in the system. And that process was like way backlogged. I mean, like 14 months behind, like they have 14 months of work, drawings in the field that was waiting to be processed through the system, right? Way behind. And so they were in dire need of two things. We were going to improve the process, and then they also needed to supplement with contingent workforce, with contractors, just to burn down some of that. But that first part of improving the process, we involved the technicians that were actually doing the work. And this is transactional work. They're doing it on a computer, but still we said, well, show us your process, like walk us through that. And, with screen share, we can have people in multiple locations just be like, share your screen, walk us through the process. And it's like your jaw hits the floor. You're like, oh my gosh, that is painful. Like, why is it so difficult to do that? And we were able to come up and get them some internal resources mobilized to make some dramatic improvements to their process, right? So I don't even want to talk about like the throughput improvements. What I want to talk about is during the debrief, right? Because I want them to own this, right? I've learned since that first mistake I told you about. I want them to own this change. So they report out, not me, like this isn't Chad trying to get the credit. The team reports out to their leadership the process they looked at, the analysis they did, the changes they made, and the results. And while they're reporting out, one of the technicians that we had on the team was reporting out and is like actually in tears, so grateful. And her words, maybe not exact, was like, I am so happy that someone actually saw the problem that we have in our process and did something about it. And so what's the most significant change is when people are actually emotional about the improvements that you deliver to their life, and it helps the business. I'll take one of those every couple of years, and that'll keep me coming back.
Yeah, those are that's what really brings the meaning to your job, to your day. It's like when you see the reaction of someone like, man, I truly thank you for what you've done. It's made my life better. And it's like, you can't get much better than that. And I really like that Adam Smith of like, you kind of need both the human and the economic side. Like, I'm going to keep coming back to that because that's really interesting. But yeah, like, and, I guess going back to the whole, like, each business owner should have like their processes written down and the standard operation procedures written down. And, I've started to do that with this, and I need to do that with my mom's company as well. But like, you were saying like, well, I'm just trying to think like, I'm thinking of myself now. I don't mean to bring it to me, but like, I was thinking of how like, if whatever business gets that standard operation procedure in, like they then, as the executive, can step away and have other people do that for them because, you know, it's standard and, you know, there's no questions about it. And it's real. What's happening in my mind right now is I'm thinking of how I can implement that into my life. And so I'm just thinking about it. I don't mean to like not even react really to your story, but it's really that I'm taking in a lesson right now of, I should write down the processes of why for any of the businesses that I want to start or work in. And, you know, that's so interesting. But
so like eventually, if you wanted to scale your business eventually, right? Or now, and if you look at some of the elements that you deliver, let's take a simple one like social media posts, right? So the primary function of your business, right, is not for you to advertise for Harley Seelbinder, right? That's something that's needed in the background. That's on the marketing end. If you ever wanted to outsource that, right, you need a process, because I can't just tell someone I need social media posts, because you know what you'll get? You'll just get social media posts, and they'll probably be terrible, and you'll have to quality check them. You have to add it, and over time you have to refine that. But if you can define the process and the quality attributes of those posts and hand that off to someone else, like now I can scale faster, right? I don't have to, as the leader, still have one hand in that pot while it's moving forward. And so whatever it is, even, you mentioned when we talked before about like video editing, if you eventually want to do twice as many, you don't have two Harleys. You would need to create another Harley. And the only way to do that is to say, this is my process. Because if you want the product to look like a Harley Seelbinder product, you have to follow the Harley Seelbinder process.
Yeah, that's really well said. And that's probably why I should start writing a book, follow your footsteps.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's amazing. And I'm definitely going to write a book or write something, just all of the processes and why. And maybe in doing that, I can say, well, this process doesn't even make sense. Let's change it. And, it's continuously improve.
But start with the processes for anyone listening. Start with the processes that are going to accomplish your goal. So if your goal is to scale, okay, step back and say, well, what can I not do fast enough? And I need to augment by outsourcing that or something else. Well, document that process and give it to someone else to do.
Yeah. And I bet, I see my mom and I see me be like, sometimes a owner might say, oh, but I might do it best. I can't give up this part of it. And I can see myself even thinking that, but it's like, you almost have to be able to trust someone to make those mistakes and learn, because like you said, there aren't two of you. You don't want to work around the clock. You still have a family and you still have other things. And it's like, you don't want to work yourself to death. And
yeah, I'll give you an innocuous example here. And I know like your listener demographic, it might not hit home perfectly, but you can go there with me. It's like, so I have 3 children, right? And they're all grade school to middle school now. But like when they're really young, right, they don't like cut their own food or tie their own shoes or other things like that. Now, to that example, if I'm the chief operating officer and I want to keep the house moving at the right pace and I want to get out the door, I can zip their jackets and tie their shoes and get out the door faster every time. Every time. But they will never know how to tie their shoes. I can do all the things in my business, even the ones I don't want to do, because I do it best or the way I like or whatever. But I am never going to create someone else in the business that I trust to do it, because I'm still doing it and I haven't told you how to do it yet. And so much like a parent coaches that's kind of getting back to the respect for people. Part of documenting that process, part of delegating that to someone else, is also developing that person so that they can step into the next level of leadership.
Yeah, that's well said. And it takes a little bit of courage almost to be like, are my processes, do they even make sense? Or can this person follow my process? Or will they do a good job, etc.? But yeah, like I like that analogy of you don't want them to be 16, 18, and you're still every morning having to go, you would just be spread too thin and life would be inefficient.
Yeah, I mean, so there might be a time when a founder of a company, I was actually talking to someone else, so this was not Expert Cleaning, this was a different company, and the founder was kind of in the mindset of they're just going to take it till retirement and then close the company. And that's crazy to me. It's like, why? Like, document your process, teach someone else to do it. You can step away and the business can still run, right? Or you can step away, it can scale, right? Or you can step away and you could sell it to someone else and it can continue operations. But, take this all the way back to it requires some sort of management system. And the management system is not just the cold calculations and the standard operating procedures. It's also the respect for people and the development and the coaching that comes along with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I'm starting to get more what you mean by management systems and process analysis and all of this. Like, I knew when I was having you on, I was like, man, this is going to help me in my school, in my podcast, in my, my expert cleaning endeavors. It's like, I see industrial engineering as like such a useful skill, and just, going to someone like you and asking these questions and learning, like I have notes for the rest of my life on how to improve. And so I'm very excited. And so I guess, what would you say to someone who's like maybe debating what field they should go to, or like sell why you think they should maybe go to industrial engineering? Or what type of person should someone, or would industrial engineering attract, and why should they do it?
Yeah. So, you made a comment early on that it's kind of like business as a system. So it's kind of like the engineering of business, if you will. So I think that's the beauty of it, is I know enough about operations and finance and logistics, and just through the diversity of roles and projects that I've had. And so I'd say the person who wants to go into industrial engineering is someone who really wants to understand like how to operate and improve a business. And that business could be small, so the boundaries of the system can expand and contract. So the business could just be running the warehouse. It could just be running the call center. But that is a business that has deliverables, and it has a budget, and it has everything else. So if that's intriguing to you, yes, there's definitely things like MBAs where we look at kind of how do I run a business. But the analytical side of improving the operations is anchored in industrial engineering in my mind. So if that's intriguing to you, of saying, I like looking at a broader picture of things, and this doesn't have to be just manufacturing, right? So I have friends that I went to grad school with that worked in like financial organizations, right? That have worked in information systems. So IT and finance or manufacturing, or, I've done work in pharma, so pharmaceuticals, in municipal government, in nonprofit organizations. So like the skills are transferable. And I think what, in my biased opinion, because I am an industrial engineer, it gives you a systems perspective and the tools for being able to analyze and improve it.
That's a great sell. 17, 18-year-old Harley would have heard that and been like, that's where I'm going to go. Honestly, I feel like industrial engineering, it's still like so many people just don't understand it, don't know what it is. And I'm like, man, us industrial engineers, we really got to keep selling and keep explaining, because I really do feel like it is honestly such a beautiful tie between business and engineering, and how like it's so broad, and like you said, it can be used in so many different fields. And it's just, yeah, I'm gonna, hopefully the people listening learned a lot, because maybe they'd never even heard of industrial engineering. But yeah, so I really thank you for coming on, because I feel like the topics that we covered are useful for anyone, even if they aren't an industrial engineer. Like even like implementing a process or documenting the process of your life. Like it might not even have to be business. Like, you know, writing down what do you do and why, and like just figuring out how to improve even your efficiency in cleaning up your kitchen. Like all of these things can be implemented into all kinds of aspects of life, and that's really why I love it as well. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking.
Yeah, well, I'm humbled by the opportunity, so thanks for the invite.
Yeah, of course. And if anyone needs consulting, I will throw his link in the description if you want.
Yeah, you can. We'll put my LinkedIn hyperlink in there, and also
Sure.
company website, which is just bareithergroup.com. So we'll put both of those in the description. And you know, if anyone's listening is either in need of consulting services, but also, you know, on the left end spectrum of your left, right, it doesn't matter. On the other career maturity end of your spectrum, someone's questioning industrial engineering, they can reach out to me as well and say, where should I go to get some more information on this? Happy to help.
Great idea. Yeah, like one guy who's 17 was like, why should I do industrial engineering? And I gave him some answers, but I actually might connect you two as well. So that'd be interesting.
Cool.
But yeah, well, thanks so much. It really means a lot.